my good friend and the moderator of this session, Dr. Kanagasabhabati, Dr. Shakti Sinha, another good friend with whom I used to interact very closely in 1999, 2000, 2001. I discovered him about a couple of months back in Delhi. Dr. Surnaran, from whom I have learned quite a lot about what it means to build close neighborly relationships, particularly in the context of Sri Lanka, where he has done enormous amount of studies. And Commodore Vasan and my good friend Muralidhar Rao, whose invitation I could not break, which made me stand before you. And I have a surprising presence of Mr. G.V. Raman, who is also my professional guru and dear friends. You know, 20 years back, maybe 25 years back, I don't think any convention on Andman Islands would have been held because it was not in the imagination of the Indian system. It was not in our psychology at all to think about our borders. You know, the idea that we have to look at every nook and corner of where our soul is, our national soul is an idea which has been reinforced by geopolitics. The definition of geopolitics has been evolving in the last 300 years, entirely based on the Western orientation. The West has been leading the world for the last 300 years on its own terms, on its philosophy, on its methods, on its impulses. And its impulses were basically violent, to which our psychology was not attuned. Even now we are a responding civilization. We cannot propose violence because violence is not in the DNA of the Indian civilization, as I will make it more and more explicit by taking you back to how the Indian DNA was built in the last several thousand years, which we are not able to focus to make the world understand what we are unless we understand what is our DNA. We cannot even understand why we are discussing about Andman Islands. You know, there is a website built by Professor R.J. Ramal of Hawaii University, who worked for 35 years to build this website, and that website is known as Democide. You Google Democide R.J. Ramal, R-U-M-M-E-L, then you will get a huge mass of information as to how in the last 2,500 years in different parts of the world there have been violence, human beings, mass killing human beings, and he estimates that in this 2,500 years dating from 5th century BC to the year 2000, that something like 1.2 billion people, 120 crore people have been killed by human beings acting against human beings in an organized and massive manner, whether it is war or whether it is famine created by ideological and other reasons. And you will be amazed to know that between the 5th century and 13th century in India, there are only 3 instances of violence cited, organized violence. There may be unorganized violence, one human being getting angry with another human being and killing him. That's personal. But an ideological, organized, and between 2 groups of varying thinking, it is only Kalinga War first, and then they could only cite the Sati and Thagi as 3 instances of violence. Of course, this is not in the main website because we were not figuring in that large-scale violence, and so it is only in the subordinate websites they were able to cite these 3 instances of violence till the 13th century, whereafter violence came from outside. It was not bodily generated from within. So a civilization not used to violence has to stand and position itself in a world of violence. Till 1897, the Western world did not distinguish between combatants and non-combatants in war. An organized war could be waged even against people who are doing agriculture, who are doing schooling. And it was perfectly valid till 1897 to attack people who had nothing to do with war, simply because they belonged to the other side. Only in 1897 at The Hague, they all agreed, no, we should respect people who do not bear any arm in their hands because they are peaceful people. Even when earlier there was supposed to be very benevolent rules of war, it applied only when it concerned my own religion. If my own religious people were not bearing arms, we should not hit them. That means other religious people, even if they did not bear arms, they could be hit. This was the world in which we functioned. I will immediately take you back to what happened in the Indian civilization. You must have all heard about The Wonder That Was India, written by A.L. Basham. Not one great lover of India, but at least a man who did not hate India. He wrote about the rules of war in the Indian civilization. And one of the reasons he said that the Indian civilization could not build an empire was because of its rules of war. You know what its rules of war said? The rules of war said that you should not wage war. That was the rule of war. In fact, if you have to conquer all the people and become an emperor, even if you had a huge army, you are not supposed to wage a war. You are supposed to do a yajna called Ashwamedha Yajna. And if those who attended the yajna have accepted you as the ruler, and this yajna will go on for 1 year, and during that period, some 1,000 people strong army will go around the country. And whosoever allows the army to go through their territory have accepted your leadership. So no war. Only if somebody stops that army, you have a war. And even after waging the war, if you win, you are not supposed to take the territory of that country. You are supposed to restore the king who is defeated as the ruler. If the king does not want to take that, you have to appoint a successor of him from within his family. If there is no successor within the family who is willing to take, you have to assemble the people of the territory, ask them, please say the name of the person whom you will accept as the leader and make him the king. You cannot take over the territory, you cannot take over the cash till of the empire, you cannot certainly touch the women. This was called Dharma Yuddha in the Indian civilization. You may be amazed that this was practiced by the Cholas, by the Pandyas, by the Kushanas, anyone. No one waged a war except one man called King Ashoka. It was Ashoka who waged a war without following this rule. And we have heard in Mahabharata that the two armies will have a cup of tea in the night. We have all heard this. And we all thought this is some story. I will cite a textbook to you, The History of Kerala by Padmanabha Menon. Padmanabha Menon says that when wars were being waged in Kerala, when the Portuguese were attacking the Keralites, the Mamuri kings, they wrote a letter to the Portuguese people. Sir, we are going to have a war. We will tell you how we wage war. We wage war that we beat the drum in the morning at 6:30 after the sunrise. Then we will wait whether you beat the drum, then only we will begin the war. And you know, we don't want to wage the war where people are. There is a distant area. It's a huge open ground. That is where we will give you, on the other side, you can put your tents. There is a huge lake. We can have our bath and all that. And you will be on the other side, we will be on this side. You beat the drum, we beat the drum. Then in the evening, if you beat the drum, we will stop the war. Then we beat the drum, you will stop the war. And then he proposed one more thing. We have 30,000 people on this side and that side. Why should we allow these 30,000 people to hit each other? You select some 50 of your best fighters. we will select 50 of our best fighters and let them have a battle. Maybe at that point, one of them will be defeated. We can think whether we should have a war. Otherwise, if we are not satisfied, you send 100 of your people, we will send 100 of your people. Then the Portuguese thought, is this man talking of war or sports? Then Padmanabha Menon goes on to say that when they had mutual wars in Kerala, the rival armies used to eat their food together, discuss, wash their horses and chit-chat, and when the drum is beaten, they will go and align themselves and begin hitting each other. The Indians never knew war. They never knew how to wage war because they did not have an enemy. They did not have an ideological enemy. They did not have a God who said to finish the other person. You will never develop strategic thinking unless you have a mind which identifies an enemy. Your mind will not identify an enemy unless you have an ideological enemy. India never knew ideology, it only knew philosophy. Ideology presumes the other man is wrong. Philosophy presumes you are right and maybe the other man is also right. Then where do you fight? The other man may also be right, means that you cannot fight. You have no enemy by definition. You may have a personal enemy. That is why Hindus are doctrinally tolerant. They may be personally intolerant. Understand this. Doctrinal tolerance is that you don't have a philosophy which declares the other man to be the enemy. This has been our idea of world view, and I will compare the two wars which we had. One is the Kurukshetra war and the other was the Kalinga war. In Kurukshetra, the Kalinga war. Ashoka waged a war in which 200,000 people were supposed to have been killed at the maximum, 100,000 people at the minimum. And after Ashoka came, it was supposed to be the most adharmic war in Indian history. This has been in the treatise on V.R. Ramachandra Dikshiter in his book on Indian wars declares never in the history of India there has been a war which was undertaken without notice. You always put the other man on notice, I am going to have a war against you, and there are rules. Ashoka never followed any of these rules. He had a war. He devastated and he came and saw, cried. So many people I have killed, so many people I have turned into orphans, so many people I have turned into widows. What have I done? And then he began crying. In Kurukshetra war, everything that Ashoka said after the war, Arjuna said before the war. He said, I am going to kill so many people. I am going to orphan so many people. I am going to hit my own guru. Why will I do it? Then Krishna said, you are a fool. When Krishna asked Arjuna to wage a war, he had undertaken every step to stop the war. He himself personally went as an ambassador. And then the war had come. It was an unsought war. It was a war imposed on the Pandavas. And Arjuna was trying to run away from the war. And then he says, are you a man or a woman? You are neither. Why are you, in the last moment, you are saying you don't want to wage a war? Then, in the final chapter, in the 63rd sloka, Krishna says, Itite jnanamahyadam guhya guhyadaram maya vimarshayata tadeshena yatechasi tatakuru. I have told you the secret of secrets. Now, whether to wage a war or not is up to you. I always used to ask, why did Krishna say it in the first chapter? Why did he bore Arjuna for 18 chapters and told him this? This is the question which was in my mind when I addressed the Gita conference sometime in the year 2001 in Kaladi. When all the scholars on Gita spoke, I was not a scholar on Gita, I am a student of Gita. So I asked them this question, why Arjuna was not told by Krishna, you do whatever you want. When Arjuna was in such distress, The chapter is Arjuna in Distress was the title of the, Confused Arjuna was the title of the first chapter of Gita. Then Sankhya Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Sannyasa Yoga, Moksha Sannyasa Yoga. Then he keeps on upgrading his level of consciousness and finally removes his confusion. And then says, you decide. You know what is the psychology? A confused man does not deserve freedom. His confusion had to be removed and he was given the option. Then he began waging the war. To make a person wage a just war requires so much effort in India. It is not in the DNA of India to wage a war. I will now bring you to 1998, when the Indian government exploded the Pokhran atom bomb. Then Bill Clinton issued a statement. This is a land of Gandhi and Buddha. It has done this. We were always a land of Gandhi and Buddha. You never bothered about us till we exploded the atom bomb. There is, if you want to know what is power, unless you know the idea of power, you don't understand what is the idea of a nation. There is one advertisement executive by name Tara Sinha, one of the most well-known advertisement executives in India. She was in Hindustan Thompson. Being a lady from a traditional house, she never used to stay in hotels when she went abroad. She always stayed with some friends or relatives. She wrote an article in the Economic Times sometime in the year 2002 that whenever she used to be in their house, the way the Indians used to abuse India, it's a rotten country, it's a dirty country, it's a country I don't want even to go there. You know what to do, my relatives are there, and there is some temple which I have to go. I wish I can uproot the temple and bring it here. You know, this is the way some 20 million Indians used to speak about India over a dinner, over a cup of tea, wherever people assembled, and we had about 300 IFS officers to counter their campaign, that we are not such a bad country. 20 million people deriding, demeaning, debranding, destroying the Indian image, our civilization, our value systems, our life, our personality, our literature, our gods, our religion, our philosophy, our sociology. The way the Indian civilization was destroyed by the educated, English-educated Indian, never in the history of the world the enemies of India have done. You know, when all this was happening, Tara Sinha said, on the day the Indian government exploded the Pokhran atom bomb, all this stopped. They began celebrating Deepavali. The Indian traffic remained the same, the dirt remained the same. In India, everything remained the same. India changed. That is power. India was treated as an outcast. It was sitting on the last line in any international gathering. After 1998, what happened, you know? So much of sanctions was there on India, technological sanctions, geopolitical sanctions, financial sanctions. At that time, the government of India wanted $5 billion foreign exchange reserves. At that time, Mr. Sinha was sitting and assisting Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was managing this crisis. So at that time, India wanted $5 billion foreign exchange, which will be about $50-60 billion today, to manage the crisis. But how to get $5 billion? No one will trust India with $1 when there was so much of sanctions on India. So the Indian government appealed to the very non-residents who have been abusing India for 30 years, 40 years, that we want $5 billion from you. They gave $6.2 billion. The India development bonds was oversubscribed. If Pokhran atomic explosion had not taken place, the very same non-resident Indians would not have put even $1 on India. It is power which made them identify with India. It is not Buddha, it is not Gandhi, it is not Krishna, it is not Rama. It is not the temples, not their relatives. It is the idea of power. Power is an element. This is an imposition by the West. This is not part of the Indian civilization at all. We never exerted power, coercive power. Now the world is seeking distinction between hard power and soft power. They never had hard power. They have barbaric power. You look at the Encyclopedia Britannica about the methods of war of the West. It was not hard war, it was barbaric war. The way they treated the women, the way they treated the children, they used to dash the children against the wall. And it was permitted. You know, we are positioning our civilization with this psyche in this world which is run on their terms. So, the importance of 1998 and the rise of India afterwards, today we are rising as an economic power, we are economic as a political power, we are rising as a geopolitical power, we are rising as a maritime power. The National Intelligence Council of America, which is the think tank attached to the CIA, says by the year 2030, there will be only 3 major world powers in the world. One is America, the next China, and third India. All the world powers today will be regional powers. They will not be world powers. You know, being a world power requires another psychology, a psychology which is not built in the Indian discourse as yet. If you have to be a power, you must first know about yourself. You cannot be quoting Milton. You must know how to quote Thiruvallur. Then only you exert your power. You are very happy quoting Milton, Wordsworth. They are not worth even in their country today. The British have stopped quoting Shakespeare. You are quoting Shakespeare. Then you should be quoting Gita, you should be quoting Thiruvallur, you should be quoting Bharatiyar. You see the kind of education that is needed, education about ourselves, what we are. This is so necessary to be a world power. Andman will figure, any place will figure. You know, in South China Sea, there are hundreds of islands which are disputed. Every island is disputed. China is saying it is its, Korea is saying it is its, Taiwan is saying it is its, Japan is saying it is its, Philippines is saying it is its. Because power means territory. You cannot exert power in Hawa. Love of territory is so important. But we are not a territorial nationalist. Our nationalism is limited to the territory where our civilization has grown. Roman nationalism extends to whichever area Rome occupies. If they occupied India, India becomes part of their territory and they get attached to India. No. In our case, it's not there. We are attached only to places where our gods are there, our civilization is there, our culture is there, our heroes are there, our history is there. So in my understanding, we require a different public discourse. The public discourse is not forthcoming from the media. The media wants to run down India. It is very happy running down India. In fact, there is in the World Economic Forum, they have said the Indian media is the second worst trusted. It also says the world media is even more badly trusted. Indian media is better as compared to the world, but it is one of the worst in the world. Because the distrust in the Indian media has gone down in the last few years. The distrust about the world media has grown even more. You can understand the media everywhere is like this. I have been part of the media and I have worked in the media. I have exposed many corrupt people, governments. Indian Express has accounted for at least 12 chief ministers, removed them from power, at least a couple of prime ministers. You know, media has a power. It's an intellectual power. It's a soft power. But it has become an anarchic power today. It's very unfortunate. And never in the history of any country, a country has been run down by the media in the way the Indian media is running down India. We must understand all that. You cannot have such a bad media and build a great national power. America used to be like this. I am surprised in the last 1 year, the American media has turned against America. Never it has happened. That means the world is getting disoriented. We are living in a disoriented world, and as nationalists, as people who are interested in positioning India as a soft power, as a benevolent power, a power which will not use power. You know, in Mahabharata, the Bhishma tells Yudhishthira, after the war is over, Bhishma was on deathbed. There's a beautiful advice from Krishna to the Pandavas. So long you have been opposing. To oppose is the easiest job. This is what Krishna says. Now you have to rule. Now the BJP has come to power. While opposing, it had all the flexibilities. Now it has to rule. It demands a different discipline. And so you have to learn the art of ruling, the Raja Dharma, from Bhishma. Then Yudhishthira and Pandava say, we have felled him, the man is waiting to die. If we go and ask him, please teach me the rule of how to rule, will he advise? No, no, no. He will. He is above the fact that you have killed him. He will be more interested in teaching in the interest of the people because you are the new ruler. So when he went there, when these people, that is where the Vishnu Sahasranama comes. Bhishma sings Vishnu Sahasranama actually. All that we know about Vishnu Sahasranama is in that place. And the first question they ask is, what was the need for a state when all are good, when we know how to care of each other? Yes, this was the position once, but when anarchists began to disturb this state, society, you needed a king, and that is why a king was born. And he explains the whole situation. And about the army and war, he says, the greatest king is one who wins the war without a battle. In fact, many people attribute it to Chinese sayings. It's not correct. It is actually, in Mahabharata, this comes. Actually, Chinese have actually copied it from us. But it has become a Chinese saying all over the world. Never wage a war, but be always prepared for war. You must be so powerful that no one wants to have a war with you. You know what is the name of Ayodhya? Meaning of Ayodhya? Ayodhya is a place or an idea. No one wants to have a war with you. That is Ayodhya. So the Indian civilization will have to change the global discourse, for which it has to acquire hard power. It has enormous amount of soft power. In fact, Joseph Nye, who invented or discovered or articulated the idea of soft power in 1983, till then, no one in America, no one in the global diplomatic discourse had the idea of soft power. It is Joseph Nye, a Harvard University professor, who changed the discourse of America. He said America is seen as bombs, America is seen as missiles, America is seen as this. You are seen as a very coercive power, but you have very soft things like Harvard University, Stanford University, Mickey Mouse. Of course, in their view, Pepsi Cola and Coca-Cola were also considered to be soft power. He said, use all this. Use Coca-Cola. Why are you using? You must understand Coca-Cola is a substitute for missile. Huh? It's a substitute for bomb. Use the soft power. Why do you use the hard power? That is why American diplomacy changed substantially afterwards. They had to see soft power in Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola and Mickey Mouse. We can have the soft power in terms of our philosophy, in terms of our war models, in terms of our attitudes, in terms of our history, in terms of what we are. The greatest soft power India presents to the world is that it knows how to make peace between gods. We have 33 crore gods. And in fact, the population of gods at one point was more than the population of Hindus. We never allowed the gods to fight with each other. We also got them married. Be in peace. The world is now seeing fight between gods. You know who mentioned this? Jean-Pierre Lehman, the IMD professor, who was also the advisor of WTO for a term, 3 years. He said there is something great about this civilization which knows how to worship many gods. Capacity to worship many gods, understand and live in peace is the essential quality needed for the world today, because the world is caught in the battle between gods. So we have to learn from the Indian civilization how to worship many gods. This is the most essential soft power of India. But who is going to talk about it? Your professors are not, your historians are not, your politicians are not, your media is not. Who is going to talk about it? This kind of education is very essential. And unless you position yourself like this in the world, you will be one of the militant powers of the world to which your DNA is not suited. So we require re-education of a very high order, and I am extremely happy that I could share some of these critical ideas with you. Thank you very much.